We are live now on the YouTube. You can start the session, Mr. Allen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. This is the Barrier-Free Accessible Mobility Challenge in our kickoff mentorship. So many of you may have seen the challenge kickoff on April 1st. We've started to get a lot of questions, already started to get a few submissions. And I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Alan Hale. I use he, him pronouns. I am the co-chair of our Barrier-Free Accessible Mobility Committee, and I am an independent consultant with Spark Access, really helping drive accessibility and disability inclusion through the mobility industry. So it's really honored to be a part of this with IEEE. Just to introduce you, you already met me, but to introduce you to the other two co-chairs, we have Dr. Shabnam Pajan with Ontario Tech University, and we have Charlie Garnett, or Charles, as you might see him listed sometimes, who is at General Motors and also a former colleague of mine. So to kick off, really talking about the significance of people with disabilities being a significant underserved community, and where so often when we talk about equity and mobility, sometimes the conversation doesn't happen where we think of disability inclusion. But just to highlight some of the large numbers, 27% of people in the US and Canada have disabilities. This is tracked through the CDC in the US, and in Canada, the CSD, and between both countries, a combined 71 million people. Across the globe, from the World Health Organization, it's 17% of the global population, and that's 1.3 billion people in the world. So when we start to think of the size of that, it's a population that can rival the size of China. When we look to the aging population, which is a significant part of the conversation we'll have today, really looking at the folks who are 60 and older. It's 12% today in 2020, but it's projected to grow almost double to 22% by 2050. And that's something that communities across the globe are beginning to prepare for. On top of that, when we start thinking of temporary disabilities, adding to the number of folks who may have an injury or fall into just some barriers or circumstances, it could be 6 months to a year, but that temporary disability factors in as well. To go beyond, I think when we often talk about mobility, people really jump to physical mobility. And so thinking of disability beyond just wheelchair users, that's the thing we often associate with disability when we discuss disability, because it's what we see when we go to park in a parking lot. It's what we see when we go to the restroom. There's always the symbol of the wheelchair user. But disability is far beyond that. And I think the reason often physical mobility comes first is because it's very visual and it's very represented in our built environment, or underrepresented, as we'll talk about when you see barriers. But other things to consider are the deaf and hard of hearing community, the blind and low vision community, cognitive and emotional disabilities, and speech disabilities. And these are very high level categories. There's more beyond this, like chronic pain, and others. I myself identify as having ADHD and chronic pain. But it's something to consider that none of these are exclusive, and there can be a lot of cross-representation between different categories. But it's best to consider the barriers that fall into this range. And then last, when I talk about some of the high-level information on disability, is really understanding that this isn't just charity work. There's a real business case behind that. And if you want to read up on it, Accenture has a report that they update every few years, but really showing that when we build for accessibility and when we invest in accessibility to really truly address the needs of people with disabilities in our community, the business case doesn't lie. It's 1.6 higher revenue of companies. It can lead to 2.6 times the net income. and twice the shareholder return. So Accenture tracks a lot of the major companies across the globe, and those who invest in accessibility often pull ahead. So just going deeper into some data, looking at global trends and implications for mobility. So looking really the significant projected increase in the proportion of older people worldwide in that growth curve going from 2022 to 2050. I've heard this often called the silver tsunami, where our systems across the board, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to housing, when it comes to access to healthcare, it's going to be overburdened. And so it's up to us right now in the present to begin planning for that and coming up with solutions and really thinking of how smart mobility can factor into that. Again, when we look at the global population age 65 or over, it's rising from 10% in 2022 to nearly 12% in 2030, 16% in 2050. This again is another projection. And looking just in 2022, an estimated 7.7 million Americans age 65 and older disclosed disabilities. Turns out as you age, the rate of disability gets higher. And what some people may just shrug off as old age can better be identified as disabilities and some of that cross identity between disability and aging. So looking at this challenge as a way to really lean into different aspects of that and express it in different ways. Looking at in Canada, that disability rate for seniors rising to 40%, up 3% from 2017. And again, these are trends that you can find across the board where our population with disability just continues to increase. And that's due to many factors in addition to access to health. It also ties into access to communities that are walkable, different layers of mobility in that of how easy is it to get around and stay active in your community. And there's also a new recognition in current generations and future generations of mental health and cognitive disabilities as disabilities, whereas folks may have shrugged it off in other generations or maybe didn't have the means for a diagnosis. When you look at really that physiological aging and mobility to lean into some of the physical mobility side of things, many of those disabilities are pain related, 68%. Mobility issues are 63%. Reduced flexibility is 59%. And again, this is kind of just mixed in that identification of is it aging or is it disability? And so it presents, again, a unique opportunity to begin to unpack that and design unique solutions around tackling those problems. And then just another footnote on some of it relates to how we move through the world relating to balance and risk of falling and that independent mobility. So there's all of these are sourced and you'll be able to find them in the appendix slides of this presentation that we'll share out afterward. So to look at some of those accessibility challenges, leaning more into transportation, around 15% of the world's population live with disabilities. Again, it's always hard to count. Numbers range from 15 to 17%, but it's estimated 240 million of that are children with disabilities. So when we look at the global population, over 2.5 billion individuals globally require assistive products and modern digital solutions such as wheelchairs, glasses, prosthetic limbs, and speech recognition software. With aging population and rising non-communicable diseases, an estimated 3.5 billion people will require assistive technology by 2050. Assistive technology is really anything that helps you navigate barriers in your lives. In 2022, 72% of Canadians with disabilities encountered one or more accessibility barriers in public spaces. Pain-related disabilities, one of the more common, followed by that flexibility, mobility, and mental health. But when we start to think of barriers, you can see here there's the classic brick in an old downtown, very common in some of our older cities or cities that maybe haven't invested in new infrastructure for sidewalks and streets. And in the US, when we look at transportation, individuals with disabilities made fewer daily trips on average, about 1.7, compared to people without disabilities, which was about 2.3. In many cases, people with disabilities opted for reducing day-to-day travel and giving up driving altogether. As we age, one of those hardest conversations, both as an older adult who might be in the situation or as someone who's caring for an older adult, becomes that moment when you lose the keys. If you rely on your vehicle for transportation, it's a really difficult thing when you're going through that. I just wanted to highlight some positive examples of barrier-free mobility and a few scenarios that are out in the world. One is one I'm very passionate about with what I do with Spark Access, but is equality in EV charging, where this is brand new infrastructure across the board. And it's largely, there's a great emphasis on speed to deliver that doesn't always meet things like building code and accounting for accessibility. So finding those examples and what technologies enable EV charging with this brand new infrastructure and this brand new opportunity in our goals for climate action, where moving to an electric vehicle can sometimes be great for people with disabilities because you no longer have to go to the gas station every week when you can charge at home. At the same time, public infrastructure may sometimes be lacking. So finding solutions and best practice and ways to innovate in this space is a great opportunity. Something we often see is increases in the air industry. So for air travel, it's been a hot topic across both US and Canada to really better protect the rights of people with disabilities, to travel safely and get to where they want to go just as easily as everybody else. One of those examples we've seen, and I think past challenges have addressed, are assistance for people who may be deaf or use hearing aids. When they're in an airport, it can often be very hard to hear your announcements and when to board. But some airports have started investing in hearing loops. There's always new technology with Bluetooth. So there's an opportunity for innovation. And again, these are just some examples from the community. One I've heard personally from folks who train guide dogs for a living is, how are guide dogs going to hear electric vehicles? So the challenge being electric vehicles make very different or almost no noise compared to traditional combustion engine vehicles. And it's a lot harder for guide dogs to recognize what to do in those scenarios. So for both blind pedestrians who may be crossing the street, maybe it's an electric vehicle or an autonomous vehicle, what happens? So understanding both the system and where we can innovate in that ecosystem between the vehicle and the pedestrian to provide a safe experience for everyone. So I wanted to move on to the challenge and why we're all here today is to really talk about our challenge statements and what the competition is all about this year. So to cover different types of disabilities and those aging barriers, we've developed 3 tracks targeting different types of user segments for this challenge. Track 1 is how might user-centric mobility technology help elderly people. Track 2, how might user-centric mobility technology help people with disabilities? And that's across the spectrum of mobility, visual, hearing, cognitive, and intellectual, and really anything else we may have left out that doesn't cleanly fit any of those categories, really taking on different aspects of disability in novel ways. In track 3, how might user-centric mobility technology help people with chronic diseases? So this fits the category of things that are often not addressed. And one of those priorities and examples would be long COVID for chronic diseases. There's several other examples to pick from that we're happy to answer questions on. But those are our 3 tracks. I'm going to go into more details of the challenge right now. So to iterate our timeline, we had the kickoff on April 1st. We are currently 1 month from then. We are at May 1st, which is about halfway through our submission window right now. We have a Q&A that we'll be hosting, and I'll share details of how to get that on your radar. All of us as co-chairs will be present. We'll answer any questions folks may have. We'll also have folks from the IEEE Smart Mobility staff for any other logistics that aren't related directly to the challenge. But that'll be May 15th, 2024, and we will post details for registering for that once we get the event up. We have a deadline for submission of May 31st, 2024. So that's the end of May, coming here in just a few weeks. So please, if you're considering submitting your proposal, do that by the end of the month. Then us as co-chairs will review the proposals with our defined criteria, and we'll look ahead to July 15th, 2024 to announce those folks who have passed and become our semifinalists with their proposals. That kicks off our next round of mentorship, as once you're identified as having your proposal accepted, we'll move forward with the competition phase, where it'll be on you to develop your idea, really test it to the criteria that we're looking for. We'll have another mentorship webinar on July 30th, open to all accepted teams to join. And then that culminates in our pitch-off competition, which will be held at the IEEE Smart Mobility Conference in Niagara Falls, September 16th to 18th. So that covers our timeline, and I will move on now to submission requirements. So for submission, it's fairly straightforward. The 2 key aspects are the written proposal. This is a maximum 10-page document, including references. The proposal components are a problem statement, the objectives of the solution, your plan for design and implementation methodology, stating your team composition, including the roles, expertise, and skills. And lastly, exploration and discussion of feasibility, user centricity and human-centered design, and practical implementation. And to go with that, we also require a 3 to 4 minute video, and we prefer YouTube as the medium of choice. So when we get into our judging criteria, I wanted to go through this line by line. So once you submit the proposal and the video, we have a rubric that is in the works and will be hosted on the website. But it boils down to novelty. Is the solution entirely novel or providing a fresh approach to the targeted challenge? Human-centered or user-centricity. Is the solution usable by the targeted users and iterated with feedback from people with disabilities to satisfy everyday mobility needs? Feasibility. Is the solution practical and feasible? Implementation. Is the solution something that mobility service providers would implement, use, and benefit from to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities and/or seniors? User adoption. Is the solution strategized to implementability, sorry, encompass human-centered and user value-based assessment or implementation? And lastly, quality of proposal and video. So to break down that rubric, to kind of our weight for the proposals. Originality is stated at 20%. The human-centered design aspect is 25%. The execution is 15%. Usability is 15%. And the pitch-off presentation is 25%. And again, when I mentioned the event, all of that will culminate in our pitch-off competition, which is the IEEE International Conference on Smart Mobility, which will be held in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, September 16th to the 18th, 2024, with a theme of towards people-centric, software-designed, connected, and electric mobility. For any questions, I encourage folks to tune in to our forthcoming webinar on May 15th, where we'll have a live Q&A. We'll also, after that, we'll be developing our frequently asked questions portion of our website. So this QR code that is posted goes directly to the IEEE Smart Mobility Challenge webpage. And I encourage everybody to follow that for any of the latest revisions and edits as we are responding to questions as we get them in the challenge. So I hope this webinar was helpful today. I hope folks got out of it a little bit of guidance on what this challenge is and how to apply. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's proposals and pitches, and I wish you all luck in helping us create a more accessible world. Thank you.